This is the podcast exclusively for association executives and members. Each week, Jeff interviews association executives about their victories, igniting new ideas for you to create greater value for your members. And now, Jeff Tippett.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Jeff Tippett. I'm grateful that you've joined us for today's episode of Victory by Association. Today's show is brought to you by Persuasion Publishers. Persuasion Publishers disrupts the traditional model of publishing. We empower you to get your story from idea to bookshelf in just 2 months with a high-quality product at an affordable cost. Learn more at persuasionpublishers.com and check out our show notes for the link. Today, I'm excited to welcome our guest, Sean Reed. Sean, how are you doing?
I'm great, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you being on the show and taking a few minutes to chat with me and create some great content here for our audience. Well, if you will, start by just giving me some general, the 30,000 foot view of your association work and what you've done in the past.
Sure. So I'm vice president with the Progressive Contractors Association of Canada. So we're, as the name implies, we're a Canadian association of construction employers in the alternative unionized space. So those are unionized companies, but not with the traditional building trades unions. And we operate from Ontario, Canada, all the way through the West Coast. We're about a 20-year-old organization, and I actually joined the company, the organization, 10 years ago. I actually founded the Ontario operations of the organization and have been looking after the Eastern Canada operations of PCA since then.
That's fantastic. Well, I had the privilege about 2 months ago to head up to Canada and speak in Toronto for it was an energy conservation group, and it was amazing time. Beautiful city. Had a fantastic time there. Well, if you don't mind, tell us something here unique about you, something that people wouldn't find on your LinkedIn profile, but might be of interest.
About me personally, well, I am a communications practitioner by training, and years ago, I wrote a speech for the Queen of England, also the Queen of Canada, Queen Elizabeth II, and she was coming over here this is in the late 90s, and she was coming here for a visit to Newfoundland, the province of Newfoundland, and I wrote a speech for her when I was working for the government of Canada at the time, and I think a newspaper reporter wrote on that speech and said something like, it was appropriately royal in that it said absolutely nothing.
But what an honor. That is fantastic, Sean. I come from a communications background as well, so I'm like in awe of your work here. That's fantastic. Well, talk to me a little bit about like a particular victory association or success that you guys have gone through, and just kind of give us the high level concept of what all is that you've done.
Yeah, I'll just highlight, as I think about it, if you don't mind, I'll highlight two wins really for our association. The first one is an internal win. The other one is an external win. The first, the internal win. So back in 2012, we were already, about a 12-year-old organization at that time. Our national president, we just got a new national president. Paul DeYoung had come in about a year before that. And the organization was ticking along okay, but just okay. And he and I were, the kind of co-leaders of that organization at the time, and really wanted to take the way that we ran the organization to another level. And so we brought in a new operational performance process and strategic planning process into the organization that really enabled us to cast a much bigger vision for the organization, but then importantly, to align our strategy with our execution in a really cohesive and consistent way. And that effort actually resulted in us doubling the revenue of our organization and the overall size of the organization over the course of 3 years. From 2012 to 2015, we doubled the size of the organization. So that was a radically important internal initiative and win for the organization.
Well, let's pause there.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Let's drill down, and then we'll hit your next one, because this is like my jaw dropped when you said all this. This is fantastic. So my first question, like hearing you tell the story, and this is kind of based on a podcast interview I did a couple of weeks ago, interviewing someone, and their association just hit rock bottom, and they had to redo the entire organization. What was the genesis, or what was the catalyst for you guys making this strategic decision to go in this direction? Was there a pain point? Was there a pressure? Was something happening? Or was it just foresight? Or what was going on? How did you make the decision, first of all?
I think that the main thing that was going on, at least from my perspective at the time, was, we were performing fine, but we weren't performing with a lot of intentionality. And it was almost like we were performing okay, not meaning to disrespect ourselves or the folks that came before us, but, a little bit by accident. Like the budgeting process was a little bit of a, stick the thumb up in the air, see which way the wind's going, kind of take a stab at it. A lot of reacting to different scenarios, and just not feeling like we really had direction, control over the direction of the organization the way we wanted to, and control over our destiny. And so we just kind of got restless about that, and wanted to put a different, wanted to put a different stamp on things, and take a different approach that was more intentional and more focused. And that was really, that was at the root of what we wanted to do and why we did it.
Talk to me a little bit about, and that's fantastic. Talk to me a little bit about the members and the membership, and how you conveyed this to the members, your messaging to the members, and getting members on board. What was that process like for you?
Yeah, that was, and actually, another thing that was going on at this time was we actually rebranded the organization at the same time. So there was a lot going on there at that time. But our members are these are construction contractors, small, medium, and large construction contractors. Some of them are building massive projects in the oil sands in Alberta, and the major hydro projects in BC, and then they're also building smaller residential contractors in parts of rural Ontario and stuff. So a real mix. But what we wanted to convey to them, and frankly what they were telling us too, is that they wanted to have a greater sense that their money was being stewarded as effectively as possible. And because we are not the cheapest organization out there. And, these companies, especially the smaller ones, are putting relatively large sums of money into our coffers, and they want to see that investment is being well used. And that was definitely for our members, that was at the root of getting this operational performance management process down pat. It was just really making sure that when we set goals and set intentions, we were delivering on them, and we were being accountable to ourselves and to our members. And that's what we tried to deliver.
That's fantastic. Well, you went through a lot at once, at least just like hearing it from this side of the microphone. It sounds like a lot to take on at one. But I think what I heard here is one of the things is like, because that's often a question when associations are trying to make a shift and move from one space to another, and whatever that happens to look like, sometimes it can be a struggle. And sometimes, like what you just said, like you were doing good, and sometimes good becomes good enough for an organization. And you have to like jolt those members into saying, you know what, yeah, we're doing good, but we can do better. We can do more. We can take it a different direction. But what I hear you saying is like the leadership was kind of feeling a need to head in a direction. And it sounds like your members, like you guys, there was some cohesiveness here, and you were both wanting to move forward in a more strategic direction.
Yeah, we did. I mean, as I said, we had Paul DeYoung, our national president, had arrived not long before then. And, credit to him, he really wanted to, put a fresh stamp on things and take this organization to the next level. And in some ways, yeah, it sounded like a lot to take on at once, but in a way it made perfect sense too. To just, if you're gonna reinvent the organization,
do it all.
rip that Band-Aid off. Don't, not death by 1,000 pinpricks or whatever.
Just get it off. I love it. Well, let's share with us a little bit about the external. You've piqued my interest here now.
Sure. So our vision for our organization and for our members and for frankly the construction industry in Canada in general is that it would be fair for all participants, regardless of the affiliation of their workers, whether they're non-union workers or building trades union workers or alternatively unionized workers, that it's, that construction is done in a fiscally responsible and effective manner, especially public construction, and that we really ultimately we build this country and its infrastructure together, and so we spend our time focused on helping policymakers at all levels of government develop good public policy that's in the interests of Canadian taxpayers when it comes to infrastructure construction and industrial construction. And then, the flip side of that, of course, is we want to make sure that we're advocating for a level playing field for our members in that industry. And one of the areas that I was actually hired when I was asked to start our organization in Eastern Canada, the number one issue was in Ontario at the time. There was probably getting close to about $1 billion worth of municipal infrastructure market, like annual budgets for municipalities in the province of Ontario, that were completely off limits to 2/3 of the industry because of a loophole in our labor laws that allowed for these municipalities to be to only be able to tender to certain to contractors and their workers with certain labor affiliations, and that actually basically cut off 2/3 to 3/4 of the industry from bidding on that work. I won't get into the technical details. Are pretty technical, as you can imagine, but essentially, we saw where you would normally have 10 bidders on a construction project, let's say to do a water and wastewater treatment plant, you would get 2 bidders because of this law. And so that was not only being blatantly unfair to the rest of the market, but it was also extremely costly. So, in some cases, municipal projects like a water and wastewater treatment plant, the cost of that could inflate by as much as 80% in one case. There was a case in Hamilton Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, where that was the case. So this was an egregious offense, not only to our members, but also to taxpayers in general in the province. So that issue was a major catalyst for a number of the contractors in this region, in the Eastern Canada, to get together and say, we need to pool our resources and start speaking up for ourselves and for taxpayers in this region. And so I was hired to start the organization in that area on the back of that issue. And we worked for 10 years lobbying different governments at all levels of the government structure in Canada, municipal, provincial, federal, working with folks in opposition, folks in government, in the media, wherever we could, to get this issue on the public radar, and then ultimately to get legislation passed. And I'm happy to say that this year, we finally got, after 10 years, we got the legislation passed to ensure fair and open construction tendering in all municipal and actually all municipal construction across the province of Ontario, which is opening up. In the end, it opened up almost $1 billion worth of new market for our members, and certainly saves the taxpayer millions of dollars on construction in the province.
Well, congratulations. I mean, that's just fantastic to start with. Congratulations on your success and the work that you did there. Talk to me a little bit about, especially coming from a communications background. We know that anything around public policy, for any of us that work in that space, and my firm that I own does a lot of grassroots work, where we work to influence how the public perceives policy prescriptions. Talk to me a little bit about the messaging and the work that you did in the messaging to make sure that something that might be a little bit blurry for people or hard to understand. How did you take all the issues, everything surrounding this, and make it concise that would help these elected officials understand what it is that you were trying to accomplish and why they should move in that direction?
Well, the best way to do that we could find was really to make it real. So, to look at individual projects and show them, so you'd go to a local, member of provincial parliament here, who's sort of like our equivalent of a state legislator, and we'd go to their city that was affected by this issue, and we'd go to their neighborhood and look at the school that they were trying to build there, or the water and wastewater treatment plant that they were trying to build there, or the hospital they were trying to build there. And we'd say, look, you're gonna build this project, and your constituents are paying for it. Would it shock you to know that you're spending 30% more on that project than the very same project they built in the city, less than an hour's drive away from here? And so we'd make it real, for these folks, and not only would we do that, but of course then we'd go into the media. We'd find opportunities every time. We had the Pan Am Games in Hamilton, Ontario a few years ago, and this is one of the cities affected by this. And they built they did a big stadium project. And as soon as they announced that stadium project, I was on the local radio in Hamilton saying, we're going to spend 30% more on this. Get ready. You're going to spend $300 million more than you need to on this project. And those kinds of things really make it real, make it jump out for both the average voter and taxpayer, but also obviously for the politicians.
Yeah, absolutely. So you hit two of my favorites there, like with a shocking quote, but also understanding loss aversion and what people are going to lose. And especially when it comes to losing money, that's a huge deal, regardless if you're an elected official or if you're a constituent. That's, none of us like to lose money. So fantastic. Well, Shawn, both of these are incredible successes. Congratulations to you and your association for the hard work that you're doing. If people want to reach out to you and connect with you, maybe talk with you a little bit more about some of these spaces, how's the best way for them to find you?
Well, they can find me personally on LinkedIn, but also through our association's website at pcac.ca.
Fantastic. And we'll include the LinkedIn profile and also the website in today's show notes. Shawn, thank you for taking time out to talk with me today and to share your success, your victory here. I appreciate it. I appreciate your time. And thank you all for joining and being part of today's show. I'll see you next week as we discover another victory by association.
You've been listening to Victory by Association with Jeff Tippett. If you've enjoyed, please subscribe, rate, and review. Be sure to check out the show notes for links relating to this episode. For information about becoming a sponsor or guest, please email podcast@jefftippett.com.